The day I saved my daughter, I fell from the cliff, suffering injuries so severe that I lost all memory of who I was. Everyone in the capital believed Sophia Whitmore was dead, including my husband Vincent. When a year passed after my supposed death, he remarried. His new wife, Evelyn, bore a striking resemblance to me in both appearance and temperament. She and Vincent lived in perfect harmony, conducting themselves with the utmost propriety, and even my own children had grown attached to her. On the day I returned home, Vincent stood protectively beside his tearful new bride, regarding me with cold indifference. "Evelyn is my lawfully wedded wife," he declared firmly. "There is no reason for her to yield her rightful place to anyone." A wave of relief washed over me. During my years of lost memory, I too had remarried. The day of my homecoming, Vincent had taken leave from his duties to receive me. He maintained a careful distance of 2 steps as we stood together, his tone measured and distant as he spoke of old times. "Clara has grown to look remarkably like you," he said, referring to our eldest daughter. "However, she is currently studying painting with Master Thompson's wife, so she could not come to greet you immediately." He paused when he began to speak of our son. "When you departed, young William was but an infant. He has no memory of your face now." Clara had been 3 years old when I fell from the cliff, while William was barely 1. It was only natural that he would have no recollection of me. At the mention of my children, my heart grew tender with longing. During the 5 years of my amnesia, while Vincent had taken a new wife, I had also found love again. There was truly no compelling reason for me to return, save for the fact that I could never forget my children. Vincent's voice softened as he continued. "You must have heard the news. 4 years ago, I remarried." I turned to study his profile. When he spoke of his new wife, his expression grew gentle, and I could detect a barely perceptible tenderness in his eyes. "Evelyn is different from you," he said carefully. "She came to this house after you. Her birth is humble, and she is delicate in both body and spirit. Should she make any errors, I trust you will show forbearance." Every word was spoken in Evelyn's defense. I stared at him for a long moment before speaking quietly. Why would I wish to make things difficult for her? Their marriage was clearly one of deep affection, and I had my own husband now. Were it not for the fact that my children remained in Vincent's household, I would never have returned at all. Vincent led me through the covered walkway, and I found myself lost in contemplation as I took in the familiar yet changed surroundings. Vincent and I had been childhood sweethearts, married in our youth. When he sought my hand in marriage, he had specifically ordered the renovation of Cypress Garden, arranging it to mirror exactly the residence I had known before our wedding, a place of serene elegance that matched my taste perfectly. Now, however, the weeping willows by the pond and the peach trees in the courtyard had vanished. Vincent explained matter-of-factly, "Evelyn suffers from breathing difficulties. She cannot tolerate willow catkins or flower pollen." So Cypress Garden had become Evelyn's residence. I lowered my gaze and smiled faintly. Naturally, her health must take precedence. Vincent looked startled. He studied my face with a furrowed brow. "Sophia, you have changed considerably." I responded without much thought. "Is that not for the better?" He smiled suddenly. "Indeed it is. I had worried you might not be able to accept Evelyn's presence, but now I see you have developed the grace to accommodate others." When we had pledged our love years ago, I had made him promise that I would be his only wife for life, that he would take no concubines. He had agreed readily then, speaking words of eternal devotion that seemed carved in stone. Little did I know how brief that lifetime would prove to be. After 4 years of marriage, I had fallen from a cliff and become, in everyone's eyes, Vincent's deceased first wife. Whether he remarried or took concubines should have been no concern of a dead woman. But here I stood, very much alive. Apparently, this was what he meant by my newfound grace to accommodate. I frowned. Vincent, that is not what I... Before I could finish, we were interrupted. At the end of the walkway, Evelyn stood leaning against a door frame, her sleeve pressed to her lips as she coughed delicately. "Has dear Sophia returned?" she asked in a voice soft as silk. Vincent strode forward immediately, taking a cloak from a waiting maid and draping it around Evelyn's shoulders with tender care. I hesitated for a moment, then approached as well, bound by courtesy. After all, she had helped raise Clara and William. Now that she had acknowledged me, it would be rude not to respond. Her features bore a striking resemblance to mine, perhaps 60% similar. She had the same arched brows and bright eyes, though hers drooped slightly at the corners, lending her an air of innocence and vulnerability. As I drew near, she lowered her gaze submissively and curtsied with practiced grace. A maid beside her held a lacquered tray bearing 2 steaming cups of tea. Evelyn lifted one of the cups and offered it to me. "Please accept this tea as a gesture of respect, dear sister." I did not take it, instead saying gently, "Such formalities are unnecessary. And please, you need not address me in that manner. You are, after all, his lawful wife." Evelyn raised her eyes to mine. In the next instant, she suddenly lost her grip on the delicate porcelain cup. It shattered against the ground, and the scalding tea splashed entirely across the back of her hand. She quickly withdrew her hand into her sleeve, her lashes trembling like butterfly wings. She seemed overcome with hurt, her voice catching as she spoke. "You would not accept my tea, sister. Do you resent me for occupying the position of wife?" Vincent stepped forward immediately and grasped her hand. Where once her skin had been pale and smooth, it now showed an angry red mark. "Bring cold water at once," he ordered the servants. Only after ensuring her care did he turn to me, his eyes blazing with anger. "I had no idea you had become so cruel." His words dripped with sarcasm. "Though I suppose after wandering alone for so many years, you would have needed to develop such tactics to survive." Each phrase was calculated to wound, striking deliberately at my most vulnerable places. I clenched my sleeves and looked at him coldly. I did not spill that tea. My accompanying maid, Ruby, brought the second cup from the lacquered tray. I took it and hurled it forcefully at Vincent. "This one I did throw." Vincent pulled Evelyn aside to avoid the projectile, though droplets still splattered his robes. His eyes grew dark as winter storms, his voice trembling with suppressed rage. "Your behavior is utterly unreasonable." He turned away, escorting Evelyn into the house and leaving me standing alone outside. I took several deep breaths to calm myself. Once my temper had cooled, my anxiety for my children only intensified. What manner of upbringing had they received under Evelyn's care? With this thought weighing on my mind, I instructed Ruby, "Go to the study and request that young William be brought to me." I waited in the garden pavilion for my son. Within a quarter hour, William arrived. His hair was styled in the traditional manner for boys his age, and though he still carried some childish roundness in his cheeks, I could already see traces of Vincent's features beginning to emerge, yet there was no hint of joy in his expression. Ruby had to prompt him, "Young Master William, this is your birth mother." He lowered his head and reluctantly mumbled, "Mother." I gazed at him quietly as tears welled in my eyes. When I had left, he was barely walking, still wrapped in swaddling clothes. Now he had grown into this young boy standing before me. With trembling hands, I reached out to touch his cheek. He pulled away. I withdrew my hand without taking offense. "Tell me, how have your father and Lady Evelyn treated you these years?" Father is always busy with advancing his career and has little time for me, he replied. But Lady Evelyn has been extraordinarily kind. She remembers all my preferences, ensures I have good food every day, and even personally selected my tutors. When he spoke of Evelyn, his eyes grew bright and animated. My heart ached with bitterness, yet I felt grateful that she had not allowed him to suffer neglect. I managed a strained smile, but then he looked up at me with an earnest expression. "But Mother, why did you have to come back?" My smile froze on my lips. Seemingly unaware of my distress, he continued, "What is Lady Evelyn supposed to do now?" I suppressed the tumult of emotions within me and replied calmly, "She remains your father's wife. That will not change." He pressed further. "And what about you, Mother?" I said, "I have married another, but I have never stopped thinking of you and Clara, which is why I returned, to ask whether you might—" "Married another?" William interrupted, his eyes widening with shock and dismay. He stared at me with something approaching fury. "After living heaven knows how for all these years, with your reputation surely in tatters, who could possibly have agreed to marry you? And what manner of man who would take you could be worthy of being called my stepfather?" Vincent had been right. William no longer recognized me as his mother. To me, he had become equally foreign. I studied his face, searching for any hint of the child I had once known. "Who taught you to speak in such a manner?" He pressed his lips together stubbornly and said nothing. I already knew the answer and felt my heart sink with disappointment. "Since I have returned, I can now oversee your education directly. It seems we must find you a new tutor." William's brow furrowed. "If you have married another, how can you interfere in the affairs of this household?" After only a brief conversation, I understood that my son had been thoroughly corrupted in my absence. He had become rigid in his thinking and prejudiced in his judgments. Yet remembering that I had never been present to guide his upbringing, my heart softened. I removed a jade pendant from my waist and offered it to him. "In the future, should you ever regret your current path, come to me. As your birth mother, I will help you once, though there will be conditions." William hesitated for a long moment before finally accepting the pendant. I found myself reluctant to meet Clara, fearful of what I might discover. I sat alone in the pavilion for a considerable time, my spirits growing heavy. At length, Ruby came to me. "Your Highness, His Highness has sent word to the Thompson residence. Miss Clara should return shortly." As sunset approached, Clara came home. She sought me out immediately, lifting her skirts to run toward me, still carrying the scent of ink from her painting lessons. "Mother!" she cried. I gathered her into my arms, holding her close. She buried her face against my robes, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Mother, I always thought it was my fault that you died." My heart constricted painfully. I quickly took out my handkerchief and cupped her face gently, wiping away her tears. "Clara, do not weep. The assassins caused my fall, not you." That year, Vincent had aligned himself with the third prince, using every means at his disposal and making countless enemies in the process. When we went to the mountain temple to offer incense, we were attacked by assassins. To protect Clara, I had donned Vincent's outer robe to draw the killers away. During my escape, I had fallen from the cliff, suffered severe injuries, and lost my memory. Eventually, I found my way to Riverdale Province, where I encountered Prince Alexander. After comforting Clara for some time, she showed me a piece of paper, a painting she had made. Though the brushwork remained childish, I could see it was meant to be my portrait. Her voice was still thick from crying. "This is what Mrs. Zhao taught me to paint. It is meant to be you, Mother." Mrs. Zhao, Master Thompson's wife, had been a dear friend of mine years ago. 4 years earlier, when Vincent remarried, Clara had begun studying painting under Mrs. Zhao's guidance and often stayed at the Thompson residence. I examined the painting carefully, feeling tears spring to my eyes once more. Clara's expression grew downcast. Lady Evelyn says I paint poorly. She tells me that as father's eldest daughter, I need not learn such things. But Mrs. Zhao told me that you were once renowned throughout the capital for your painting and calligraphy, mother. I wanted to be more like you. I smiled warmly. For someone your age, this is quite skillful indeed. This was not mere consolation. Clara showed genuine talent. Finally, she smiled back, her eyes crinkling like crescent moons. I asked carefully, I have remarried, Clara. Would you be willing to leave this household and come with me to Riverdale Province? She nodded emphatically several times. I exhaled in relief and said with genuine joy, Then it is settled. I will have your belongings packed, and we shall depart in a few days. As darkness fell, Ruby carried a lantern ahead while I walked hand in hand with Clara through the gardens. She told me many things. How Vincent had deliberately sought out a woman who resembled me to help his children accept his new marriage, and how Evelyn rarely restricted Clara's activities but also discouraged her from learning anything of substance. Clara looked up at me with clear, bright eyes, but Lady Evelyn herself is always studying, learning painting, calligraphy, and household management. Evelyn was clearly not the sort of simple-minded, traditional woman she appeared to be. She understood everything quite well. I grasped her intentions and felt my hands clench involuntarily. We had not walked much further when we encountered the person I least wished to see. Vincent stood beneath the covered walkway, his features half illuminated by the lantern light. Evelyn has graciously arranged for the west courtyard to be prepared for you, despite everything that occurred earlier. You will stay there tonight. The west courtyard had been empty for years. I frowned. I will not be remaining in this house. Vincent laughed coldly, his tone brooking no argument. If you do not stay, where else would you go? You are my first wife, Sophia Whitmore, recorded in our family genealogy. For you to return only to leave again would be a disgrace to both our families. Clara tugged gently at my sleeve and looked up earnestly. Mother, did we not plan to go to Riverdale Province? Ignoring Vincent entirely, I smiled down at her. Yes, darling, we are going to Riverdale Province. Vincent's voice rose sharply. Riverdale Province? He stared at me for a long moment, and I could see the moment understanding dawned. A mocking smile played at the corners of his mouth. Do you think to threaten me with this? To advance by retreating? His certainty that I could not possibly leave him was absolute. Evelyn is my lawfully wedded wife. There is no justification for her to yield her rightful position. I nearly laughed aloud, at Vincent, at myself, at the absurdity of it all. 5 years of marriage, and I had never truly known the man I had wed. I spoke with deliberate calm. My husband awaits me in Riverdale Province. Vincent's expression froze. His face grew ashen, his lips parted slightly, and for a long moment he could not speak. You married someone in Riverdale Province? He finally managed. I nodded and began to walk past him, Clara's hand in mine. We are each married to others now. We have no further connection. Suddenly, my robe was seized from behind. Vincent's grip was so tight I feared the fabric might tear. Gone was his facade of composed indifference. His voice was nearly a snarl. I do not believe you. I am now a favored minister of His Majesty, holding the position of Assistant Minister of Personnel. Would you truly abandon such wealth and status? In Riverdale Province, Officials of your age hold ranks no higher than 7th grade. Are you truly willing to endure such hardship?" By the end, his voice had weakened almost to a sob. I turned away, unwilling to look at him any longer. "Vincent, you and I are not alike. I do not care about such things. I care only for him as a person." Vincent refused to release me. His eyes had grown red-rimmed, though his expression remained dark and stormy. "What of Clara and William? Do you care nothing for them either?" Clara gripped my hand tightly, her small body trembling. "Clara will naturally come with me. As for William..." My gaze darkened. "Since he refuses to acknowledge me, let him do as he pleases." I had left him a way to return to me if he chose. I could do no more than that. Vincent moved to block my path again. I briefly released Clara's hand, drew a small dagger, and cut away the portion of my robe he held. Guards dropped from the shadows, placing their swords between Vincent and me, preventing him from approaching further. Forced to halt, he called out desperately, "Clara still bears the family name." I took Clara's hand once more and walked away without looking back. Not any longer. I brought Clara home to the Whitmore family residence. Prince Alexander had been staying at the palace recently, conducting affairs of state with His Majesty, which gave me more time to spend with my parents. Clara, exhausted from the day's events, fell asleep early. I lit a lamp and sat down to calculate accounts. Recovering the dowry I had left at Vincent's house was a complex financial matter that kept me occupied late into the night. The next morning, I assembled several carriages and dozens of servants to retrieve my belongings from Vincent's residence. I made no attempt at discretion. When Evelyn hurried to the scene, she found Whitmore family stewards checking items against dowry lists as they removed my possessions from the house. She approached with obvious distress and anxiety. "Sister, surely there has been some misunderstanding. Your husband has not divorced you. Why are you so eager to sever all ties with his household?" I regarded her with a sudden smile. "I understand Vincent took you with full ceremony, the traditional rites, the proper procession, everything befitting a principal wife." Evelyn paused, a faint blush coloring her cheeks. "Yes, that is correct." I continued, "Then you are his lawfully wedded wife. Our law recognizes no such thing as co-wives. Having married you, he has no further obligation to me." Evelyn lowered her head, something shifting in her gaze. She suddenly grasped the hem of my robe as if to kneel before me. "I see now, you object to this arrangement. I am willing to become a concubine, to yield the position of wife to you, sister." I found this puzzling. For her to ask Vincent to demote her from wife to concubine would hand him an enormous scandal. I felt disgusted and struck her hand away firmly. She stumbled backward awkwardly, then raised her tear-filled eyes to look past me. Her hair had come loose, yet even disheveled, she remained beautiful. I knew Vincent had arrived, but he did not move to help her. Instead, he approached me directly. Vincent's face was haggard and pale, with dark circles beneath his eyes as though he had not slept. "I have conducted an investigation. When you returned to the capital, you did not travel in a Whitmore family carriage. The carriage you used was of the highest quality, not something an ordinary person could afford. When you were in Riverdale Province, you were supposedly a penniless woman. That carriage could only have belonged to..." He paused, his eyes growing dull with realization. "The husband you speak of. But every man of such status in Riverdale Province is already married, unless you have degraded yourself to become someone's concubine, or perhaps..." I knew what he was about to suggest, that I had become some man's mistress. Concubinage required legal documents, which he could have investigated. After knowing me for more than 10 years, this was how he chose to regard me. The anger I had been suppressing burst into flame. I seized an abacus that a steward had set aside and hurled it at him. Vincent took the blow with a muffled grunt of pain. He clutched his shoulder, sweat beading on his forehead. Evelyn cried out in alarm and glared at me with pure hatred. "He is a court official! How dare you!" I pointed at Vincent, my hand shaking with rage. He has spoken inappropriately and attempted to destroy my reputation. How should that be reckoned? As we faced each other in this tense standoff, William suddenly ran forward from the crowd of onlookers. He looked up at me directly and spoke in a clear, carrying voice. "Is father wrong? Besides becoming some man's concubine, what other options did you have?" I stared coldly at this son of mine, any remaining maternal affection completely extinguished. "William, kneel." Ruby stepped forward to force him to his knees, her actions far from gentle. William winced but remained defiant, his neck stiff with pride. "Why should I kneel to you?" My voice carried no emotion whatsoever. "First, I am your birth mother. As mother and son, you owe me this respect. Second, I am Princess Alexander. As your sovereign, you owe me this obedience." I had never wished to use Prince Alexander's position to intimidate others, which is why I had traveled with only a small retinue when I returned to the capital and had not revealed my true status. Vincent stared at me for a long time, as though he could not believe what he was hearing. William was struck speechless, his mouth opening and closing without sound. Only Evelyn, supported by her maid as she stood, maintained her composure and looked at me with an unchanged, gentle smile. Princess Alexander is Lady Margaret of Sunnyvale County, renowned for her talent and beauty, of the most noble birth, perfectly matched with Prince Alexander. How could you possibly impersonate such a person, sister? Since there are no outsiders present, if you recant now, this matter need never be spoken of again. Vincent seemed to awaken from a dream, his voice hoarse as he spoke again. Setting aside how you could possibly have gained entry to a royal household, Prince Alexander is an imperial prince. He could have any woman he desired. Why would he choose a woman of unknown origins who is 3 years his senior? Ruby could not suppress a laugh. Even at this point, Lord Vincent chooses self-deception. I had no intention of continuing to defend my identity, nor did I wish to create unnecessary complications. I said simply, "Unlike you, he is neither blind nor foolish." The steward had finished cataloging my dowry and directed the servants to carry everything away. I stepped across the threshold, ignoring the commotion behind me. William, having apparently grasped the situation, stumbled after me with obvious distress. "Mother, are you truly leaving?" I glanced back at Evelyn. "Your mother is standing right there, perfectly well." He fell silent. I climbed into my carriage without another backward glance. I preferred not to discuss personal matters with outsiders. Prince Alexander's feelings for me had never been influenced by considerations of age or status. When I first arrived in Riverdale Province, I sold my one remaining earring to purchase paper and ink, supporting myself by painting portraits. The magistrate's wife admired my work greatly and, over considerable opposition, invited me into their household to teach painting to their children. The following year, at a literary gathering, their second son's painting earned recognition throughout Riverdale Province and caught Prince Alexander's attention. On that same day, the prince requested to see me. At that time, the scars from my cliff fall had not yet healed completely, so I wore a veil over my face. Prince Alexander sat in the place of honor, elegant as polished jade. He slowly rotated a jade thumb ring on his finger and asked quietly, "Who was your teacher?" I remembered nothing of my past and could only answer vaguely that I was self-taught. He sighed softly but said nothing more. Then he rose and personally brought me a damaged painting scroll. Could you copy this painting and complete what is missing? It would take considerable time, I imagine. The brushwork in the painting felt remarkably familiar, though somewhat more hesitant than my current style. I considered carefully before responding. I believe I could, though it would indeed require some time. Thus, I entered Prince Alexander's household as a court painter. In truth, I could have completed the work in 2 days, but the longer I delayed, the more I would be paid. Prince Alexander seemed in no hurry. He would occasionally come to observe my progress and exchange a few words with me. There is no need to rush. She was extraordinarily gifted. It is natural that you would need time to match her skill. As time passed, I grew bolder in our conversations. Where did Your Highness acquire this painting? Prince Alexander's expression grew somber. It was a gift from my mother, the Empress. I murmured acknowledgement. Knowing nothing of affairs in the capital, he felt comfortable sharing details with me. During the 23rd year of the Wending era, for my mother's birthday celebration, ladies from prominent families were invited to the palace. She was among them and presented this painting as her offering. I looked at the signature on the painting. It was dated the winter of the Jiachin year, the year I had come of age. Prince Alexander would have been only 12 at the time. I whispered, "Who was she?" Prince Alexander replied simply, "Someone I greatly admired." It was more reverence than romantic love, the admiration of a boy for someone beyond his reach. Prince Alexander seemed to enjoy confiding in me. As evening fell and I worked by lamplight, he would sit on the stone bench in the courtyard, bathed in moonlight, slowly sipping wine from a small cup. I only saw her a few times, actually. I listened intently, setting down my brush to grind ink slowly, afraid to miss a single word. Only glimpses through pearl curtains. I could not see her features clearly, yet she seemed like a celestial being. I was completely absorbed in his story. Prince Alexander set down his wine cup and frowned. "You have been grinding that ink for half an hour." He had been speaking of these few memories for half an hour as well. Though I dared not argue, I quickly picked up my brush again. Prince Alexander fell silent for a moment, then said softly, "In the 24th year of Wending she married. It was the year before I departed for my fiefdom." My eyes widened, and when I turned to look at him, he had leaned back and covered his eyes with the back of his hand. The courtyard was still except for the sound of his sighs. I waited for him to continue, but he remained quiet. After a moment, he lowered his hand and looked at me with feigned irritation. "Continue painting." 3 months later, my facial scars had completely healed. When I presented the completed painting to Prince Alexander, his gaze lingered on my face for a long moment, his eyes filled with complex emotions. "Are you from Riverdale Province?" he asked. "No," I replied. He asked nothing more, only smiled. "The magistrate's second son will soon depart for the capital examinations, and his third daughter has reached marriageable age. Would you consider remaining in the royal household?" The royal residence offered stability and generous compensation. I bowed my head and answered, I would be honored to stay. 2 weeks later, Prince Alexander returned the earring I had sold and placed it in my hands. He began visiting me more and more frequently, though often he would simply watch me paint in silence. When I occasionally looked up to meet his gaze, he would hastily look away in embarrassment. I found this amusing and grew bold enough to tease him. I sketched a few lines on paper, creating a likeness of him. "What does Your Highness think of this?" He approached to examine the painting, and recognizing himself, his ears immediately turned red. We continued in this manner for another 6 months. When Prince Alexander came of age, gifts from the capital flowed into Riverdale province like water. Along with the gifts came a letter urging him to marry. After receiving this correspondence, he approached me several days later with reddened cheeks and declared his feelings. I considered the matter for an entire month before accepting his proposal. Later, the Riverdale magistrate adopted me as his daughter, and the Empress issued an edict elevating me to county lady. I married Prince Alexander in grand style. Prince Alexander consulted many renowned physicians on my behalf, but my memory did not return until 3 years after our marriage. When he learned that I had regained my memories, he set aside most of his duties to remain by my side. My head throbbed with pain, and I had little desire to speak. His eyes red with unshed tears, he humbled himself before me. "Sophia, will you resent me?" "Vincent failed to protect you, causing your fall from the cliff. How could I allow you to return to his side?" "Vincent has remarried. He would not even remain faithful to your memory." His hands trembled slightly. "I waited for you for so many years. I am better than he is." I fingered the earring I had removed, understanding everything clearly now. After regaining my memory, I had immediately thought of these earrings. Before my first marriage, I had received gifts from the Empress. The imperial jewelry was magnificent and ornate. I only wore it for formal occasions and banquets. But among all the pieces, a pair of pearl earrings suited me best, and I rarely removed them. Those earrings had been Prince Alexander's secret addition to my dowry. He had recognized me by that single earring long ago, but had never revealed his knowledge. His voice was quiet as he explained, "When I gave you those earrings, I was still young and harbored no romantic thoughts. I only hoped that the bright moon would remain eternally pure. Once that moon began to shine upon me, I could not bear to let it go." I fell silent for a moment, then grasped his hands, my voice hoarse. "I do not resent you. My head simply aches. But I must return to the capital, not for Vincent, but for my parents and children." Prince Alexander's eyes finally brightened. "Very well. The festival of 10,000 years occurs in 2 weeks. I will escort you to the capital then." The festival of 10,000 years was 3 days away. After attending the celebration, I would return to Riverdale province with Clara. Before leaving, I had Evelyn investigated. She was the youngest daughter of the Grand Master of Ceremonies, raised in the South due to poor health until she came of age and was brought to the capital. She had long harbored feelings for Vincent. Originally, she favored bright colors and excelled at playing the chin. For Vincent's sake, she had changed everything about herself, mimicking my preference for plain clothing and taking up painting and calligraphy. Everyone praised her devoted love for Vincent. To marry him, she had even humbled herself to win over his children. A young woman of noble birth and beauty had debased herself to such a degree for him. Naturally, Vincent was pleased by such devotion. But what had Vincent done to deserve such sacrifice? With this thought, I instructed my agents, "Deliver my sealed message to Vincent's residence. Ensure it reaches him personally." I possessed considerable evidence of Vincent's misconduct. Within a single day, Vincent had Clara's name removed from the family genealogy. Vincent sent a reply, but I did not open it. Instead, I held it over a candle flame and watched it burn. As the paper turned to ash, a servant announced, "His Highness has returned." Prince Alexander disliked being addressed as Your Highness by the Whitmore household staff, preferring the more intimate son-in-law. He sat beside me and gently tucked a strand of my hair behind my ear. "Vincent troubled you while I was away." I nodded. He spoke to me inappropriately, so I struck him with an abacus. I gestured to show the size. A 6-pound sandalwood abacus. Prince Alexander chuckled. As he showed disrespect to the princess, you could have had him charged with a crime. I replied, he is still one of His Majesty's favored ministers, currently in high regard. I would not wish to put you in a difficult position. The imperial family did not enjoy the abundance of brotherly affection that people imagined. Though Prince Alexander was His Majesty's own brother, he had been favored since childhood and granted wealthy territory. To also punish Vincent might raise suspicions. Prince Alexander's bright eyes crinkled with amusement. You always consider everything so thoroughly. However, Vincent has grown presumptuous based on his early support of the crown and has acted outside proper boundaries. His Majesty has long intended to discipline him. There is no need for concern. He leaned in to kiss me, his hand resting on my waist. I gently pushed him away. Clara is in the next room. The following day brought the palace banquet. His Majesty entertained all court officials and their families, and Clara, now bearing the Whitmore family name, accompanied me. I personally selected her clothing and arranged her hair, adorning it with an exquisite dragonfly ornament. She stared at her reflection in the bronze mirror, her eyes growing misty once again. 5 years ago, on the day we became separated, I had also styled her hair myself. I knelt to apply delicate flower decorations to her forehead, speaking gently, "It is finished. Mother will never leave you again. Do not cry." She smiled softly. Yes. Clara and I rode with Prince Alexander to the palace gates, where his carriage stopped. Prince Alexander stepped out first, then extended his hand to help me down. I gathered my skirts with one hand and placed the other in his as I descended. Once I had found my footing, I reached up to lift Clara down as well. When I looked up, Vincent was staring directly at us. His brow was deeply furrowed, his eyes wide with shock, his gaze filled with what appeared to be disbelief and resentment. Prince Alexander steadied me and looked coldly in Vincent's direction, his voice carrying clear warning. "Lord Vincent." Only then did Vincent bow deeply, his head lowered as he spoke. "I pay my respects to Your Highness and Your Highness the Princess. I apologize for my impropriety." The veins on the back of his hands were clearly visible. Evelyn stood behind him, following his lead in bowing. She kept her head down throughout, so I could not read her expression. Prince Alexander did not acknowledge the greeting. Vincent was forced to maintain his bowing position, motionless. Understanding Prince Alexander's intent, I finally spoke coolly after a considerable pause. "Rise." Vincent raised his head and looked toward Clara, clearly expecting her to greet him as her father. Clara simply turned her head away, refusing to acknowledge him. In the past, Vincent had largely ignored Clara, and she had spent much of her time at the Thompson residence. Now that her name had been removed from the family genealogy, she naturally had no desire to recognize him. Vincent frowned and seemed about to speak when Prince Alexander crouched down to address Clara gently. "In a moment, you will meet Her Majesty the Empress and the Empress Dowager. Do not be nervous. They are both very kind people." Clara smiled up at him. "I understand." I took Clara's hand while Prince Alexander took mine, and we walked along the lengthy palace pathway, leaving the others far behind. Prince Alexander remarked, "How unfortunate that we encountered them at the palace gates today and had to endure their simple obeisance. During grand ceremonies, he would be required to fully prostrate himself before you." He wanted to help me feel vindicated for past wrongs. I smiled and squeezed his hand affectionately. At the palace banquet, seating was separated by gender. Prince Alexander joined the men in the Great Hall while Clara and I attended the women's gathering in the inner palace. According to protocol, my rank placed me near the Empress Dowager's side. The Empress Dowager spoke warmly with me about personal matters. "Alexander has admired you since he was young. That he was able to marry you shows heaven's favor." Eventually, she turned the conversation to the subject of children. "Alexander is 23 years old now and still has no heir. This continues to concern me greatly." She smiled meaningfully as she looked at me. I blushed and murmured quietly, "We are working to remedy the situation." The Empress Dowager then turned her attention to Clara. "This is your daughter? Such a well-behaved and lovely child. She looks just like you." She summoned Clara to her side and chatted with her for some time. Clara stood obediently nearby, occasionally pouring wine for the Empress Dowager, who was clearly pleased with her. "Since she is Princess Alexander's daughter, let her be elevated to county lady." Clara and I knelt together to express our gratitude for this unexpected honor. After the banquet ended, Prince Alexander waited for me in the courtyard. Moonlight flowed over him like water, creating an image of serene gentleness. My heart fluttered with joy, though propriety prevented me from running. I walked quickly toward him with small steps. "The Empress Dowager has made Clara a county lady." He stepped forward to meet me, enclosing my hands in his warm grasp. He looked down at Clara with a gentle expression. "That is not enough. She should be a princess. In the future, she will inherit part of my fiefdom as well." I looked up at him in surprise. He simply smiled. "As mother shows favoritism toward you, naturally I do the same." After the palace banquet, I prepared to return to Riverdale Province. My recovered dowry was extensive, requiring several boats for transport. After all, these possessions would eventually belong to Clara. When William learned of Clara's elevation to county lady, he threw a tantrum at Vincent's residence. Vincent had no title to pass to his son, and now William would be required to show formal respect even to his own sister. His resentment was understandable. On the day of my departure, he specifically came to see me. The guards, knowing only that he was my son and unaware of the family's internal conflicts, allowed him entry. Vincent naturally came as well, though he was stopped at the outer gate. This time, William knelt quickly, his eyes red with tears and his voice choked with emotion. "Mother, I know I was wrong." Ruby reminded him, "Young Master William, you should address her as Your Highness." I had no interest in hearing his rehearsed confession. Being intelligent, he would naturally have prepared his words carefully. I spoke directly. "I once gave you a jade pendant. Do you wish to use it now?" William looked confused, clearly uncertain how to respond. The title he desired was not mine to give, but the Whitmore family could provide him with support. With his abilities and family background, becoming a county marquis in the future was not impossible. I felt no urgency and casually opened a book to read while I waited. He sat with his head bowed, thinking for a long time before finally speaking quietly. "No, Your Highness, I will not use it." I nodded. "Then you may go." He performed a hasty bow and retreated, his expression carrying an embarrassment and distress inappropriate for his young age. As soon as we returned to Riverdale Province, Prince Alexander submitted another petition to the capital requesting that Clara be elevated to princess. Although Clara was only his stepdaughter, making this request challenging, he stated clearly in his petition that Clara's stipend would come from Riverdale Province's revenues. His Majesty quickly approved, granting Clara the title of princess. When next I heard news of Vincent's household, he had been imprisoned while I was expecting a child in the royal residence. I was not surprised by this development. Undoubtedly, Evelyn had played a role in his downfall. Though she appeared to love Vincent devotedly, she had actually undermined him at every turn, corrupting his son's character, attempting to force him to demote his wife to concubine status, and suggesting that I was impersonating a princess. She was clearly intelligent and calculating, yet she acted in this manner. There had to be more to her story. That evening, when Prince Alexander returned to the residence, I questioned him about these events. "The situation is complex," he said. "It would be difficult to explain briefly." As Assistant Minister of Personnel, Vincent had promoted several members of his extended family. When one of his appointees proved incompetent, Vincent was charged with improper recommendations. This offense could be serious or minor. His Majesty, considering their past relationship, had initially planned only a brief disciplinary action. However, the investigating officials discovered evidence that Vincent had been selling offices. While Vincent had promoted people according to regulations, Evelyn had been collecting money for these appointments. When Vincent angrily confronted Evelyn about this, she wept and insisted that he had been aware of her actions. This led to Vincent receiving 20 lashes in prison and losing his position, reducing him to commoner status. With his limited punishment for taking relatively small amounts, His Majesty's mercy ensured that William was not barred from taking the civil service examinations. However, William's future prospects had certainly dimmed. 3 days later, I received the jade pendant I had once given William. Apparently at his wits' end, he had sent it without any accompanying requests. Unable to travel to the capital myself, I wrote to my parents asking them to look after William. They need not go to great lengths. Merely ensuring he had food, clothing, and shelter would suffice. Any further assistance would have to wait until I could return to the capital. After 10 months, I gave birth to a daughter whom we named Aurora. Soon after her birth, she was granted the title of princess. The Empress Dowager doted on Aurora and frequently wrote letters urging Prince Alexander to bring us back to the capital. However, Aurora was still an infant and could not endure the hardships of travel, so our return was delayed until her first birthday. Upon reaching the capital, I first took Aurora to pay respects to the Empress Dowager before visiting William. William had been enrolled in a private school. Though academically outstanding, his father's disgrace had made him a target of persecution, and no one wished to associate with him. He had grown thin, his childish features completely gone, and his expression was listless. Seeing me, he managed a weak smile and performed a deep bow. "Your Highness," I said, "I have arranged for a private tutor for you. You may study with him instead of remaining at the school. I have also provided sufficient funds to ensure your comfort until you reach adulthood, though the money remains with your tutor and cannot be withdrawn early." His eyes brightened momentarily before he lowered his head again. "What condition did your Highness mention previously?" Initially, I had wanted him to leave Vincent's household and remove his name from their genealogy, but such measures were no longer necessary. I considered before answering, "Do not easily forgive Vincent." As William's father, Vincent should have borne primary responsibility for raising him in my absence. Instead, he had been neglectful and indifferent. William's current situation was largely Vincent's fault. William bowed deeply. "I understand." He kept his eyes down so I could not read his thoughts or know whether he would honor this promise. It no longer mattered. Scholars valued filial piety. His disrespect toward his birth mother had already damaged his reputation, and Vincent's downfall had worsened his position considerably. In all likelihood, we would rarely see each other again. When I returned to the Whitmore residence to visit my parents, I encountered Vincent once more. I learned he had been lingering near our home for days and had been driven away by guards several times. After his punishment, he had received no proper medical treatment and now walked with a permanent limp. As I approached the residence, he stumbled toward me, his hair disheveled and his eyes red-rimmed, nearly collapsing at my feet. Guard swords were immediately pressed to his throat. He suddenly cried out to me, "I was falsely accused! Evelyn is not who she claims to be." I paused. Vincent glanced at the guards surrounding me, indicating that he wanted privacy for his revelation. I replied, "It matters little. You have already fallen so low. What more harm could anyone do to you?" Vincent gritted his teeth. This information could increase my punishment significantly. My curiosity was piqued. I ordered him bound and brought inside, ensuring he could not move before dismissing the others to hear his story. Evelyn is actually the daughter of Minister Lee. When Minister Lee supported the second prince, I fabricated charges against him to help His Majesty secure the throne, leading to his family's exile. Evelyn was rescued during the exile and somehow assumed the identity of the Grand Master of Ceremonies' daughter. I never sold offices. She framed me for revenge. After listening, I said simply, "I cannot help you, nor would I." "Do you wish to exchange charges of selling offices for accusations of consorting with a criminal's daughter? Regardless of the truth, as husband and wife, you share responsibility." He closed his eyes, his face ashen. "I know I cannot be pardoned." "But will you simply overlook how she turned you against William?" I struck the desk forcefully, my gaze icy. "You are William's birth father. Everything happened with your tacit approval." "Guards, remove him!" Vincent was roughly dragged away by the guards. Evelyn came to collect him. They would likely torment each other for years to come. But their affairs would no longer concern me. I spent only a few months each year in the capital, and with everyone aware of my complete break with Vincent, news of him and William no longer reached my ears. I devoted myself to raising Clara and compensating for our lost 5 years together. Aurora was 9 years younger than Clara, who showered her little sister with affection. When Aurora first learned to walk, she would lean against walls and follow Clara everywhere, calling out, "Sister," with stumbling steps. Our days were blissful. Years later, when His Majesty reduced the territories of several princes, he left Prince Alexander's domain untouched. Prince Alexander had already petitioned that Aurora and Clara should inherit his lands. While they would enjoy the income and some governing authority, these privileges would end with their generation. His Majesty readily agreed. Having witnessed the painful example of my marriage to Vincent, Clara refused all proposals. I allowed her this choice. As a princess, she lacked for nothing and need not seek security through marriage to a man who might cause her grief. Aurora, however, had a childhood sweetheart with whom she shared innocent affection. I did not interfere in this relationship. Aurora had been spoiled by Clara and Prince Alexander throughout her childhood. Though she understood propriety, she could not tolerate injustice. As an imperial princess, no one dared mistreat her. Prince Alexander had met Aurora's chosen companion several times. While reluctant to praise the young man, he admitted, "His character is sound." This assessment satisfied my concerns. When William reached 24, he achieved the rank of second-class graduate in the imperial examinations and was appointed county magistrate several months later. While traveling to his post, he passed through Riverdale province during the winter solstice and properly submitted a card requesting an audience to offer seasonal greetings. Clara, seeing him alone in the world, felt sympathy for this brother and granted him an interview. He wept bitterly in Clara's presence. Later, Clara told me he harbored resentment toward Vincent and refused to show him any kindness. Consequently, others criticized him for being unfilial. While his fellow graduates found positions in the Hanlon Academy or became capital officials, only William was sent to serve as a county magistrate far from the capital. After hearing this account, I simply said, "This outcome is quite favorable. At least he held the rank of 7th grade official." Clara smiled and spoke no more of him. As evening fell and lamps were lit, the kitchen had prepared steaming hot dumplings. Aurora closed the door and sat beside Clara, chattering about recent events. "Yesterday, Christopher gave me a red bean bracelet. What could he mean by this?" Clara rested her chin in her hand. "I cannot say for certain, though perhaps..." Aurora was slow to understand such matters, and Clara had little experience with men. They could puzzle over this question all evening without reaching a conclusion. Prince Alexander's expression darkened. It means he is lovesick. Aurora's face immediately flushed red as she buried her head in embarrassment. I could not suppress my laughter. The night was long, and we could talk until dawn. I could only hope for tomorrow, when winter's end would bring spring's return once more.